My name is Janice A. Martell. I am 31. My boyfriend, or I guess now my ex, is 29. We've been together a little over 3 years, living together for the last year and a half. On the surface, things looked stable. Rent paid on time, shared groceries, weekend routines. But underneath that, there was this constant low-grade tension I kept telling myself was normal. He has a sharp way of talking when he's irritated, not yelling. Worse than that, sarcastic, dismissive, like he's already decided you're wrong and he's bored waiting for you to catch up. Anytime I brought up something that bothered me, he'd sigh and say I was being intense or needy. It trained me, slowly, to swallow things before they became a thing. Last Tuesday, he came home late, tossed his keys on the counter, and announced, "I need space to think." I asked what that meant. He rolled his eyes. Exactly what it sounds like. Space. I can't breathe in this relationship right now. I stayed calm, asked if he wanted to talk it out. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Talking is why I need space." Then he grabbed a bag from the closet, not a suitcase, a deliberate overnight bag. That was my first real warning. I asked where he was going. He hesitated for half a second too long and said, "I'm staying at Maya's." Maya, his ex-girlfriend, the one he swore was ancient history, the one I was told not to worry about because nothing ever worked between them. "It's not like that," he added quickly, already annoyed. "I just need somewhere neutral to think." Neutral. Her house, right. Before I could even respond, he hit me with, "Don't blow this up. If you trust me, you'll give me the space I'm asking for." He walked out before I could say anything else. The door clicked shut, and the apartment felt too quiet. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, replaying every moment where I'd ignored that tight feeling in my chest. He wanted space. I just didn't think he realized how much space he was about to get. The first night without him was unsettling in a way I didn't expect. Not dramatic, just empty. His water glass still on the counter, his hoodie draped over the chair like he'd be back any minute. I kept checking my phone out of habit, even though he hadn't texted. Around midnight, a message finally came through. "I'm safe. Don't spiral. I just need time to think. No, I miss you. No, we'll talk soon." Just instructions like I was a problem he temporarily set aside. I replied with a simple, "Okay." That was it. No questions, no pushback. I decided if he wanted space, I wasn't going to beg for scraps of reassurance. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Too much quiet will do that to you. I made coffee and sat at the table, staring at the wall where we'd talked about hanging photos someday. I started replaying things I brushed off for years, how he'd roll his eyes when I talked about my job, how every argument somehow ended with me apologizing, how Maya's name still came up just often enough to stay relevant. By noon, curiosity got the better of me. I checked his location. He'd shared it for safety months ago and never turned it off. There it was, Maya's house. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. He said he needed space. Thinking takes time. Then my phone buzzed again. A photo notification. One of his friends had posted a story. Wine glasses clinking, a familiar couch in the background. Maya's couch. The caption read, "Sometimes you just need the right people to clear your head." My chest tightened, but not in a panicky way, more like something settling into place. A puzzle piece clicking in whether I liked it or not. I didn't text him. I didn't confront him. I just sat there staring at the screen and realized something uncomfortable but very clear. He wasn't thinking. He was testing how much he could get away with. And for the first time in a long while, I stopped worrying about how he'd feel and started thinking about what I was willing to tolerate. That was the moment I opened my laptop and started checking the lease. The lease was in both our names. That used to make me feel secure. That morning, it just felt informative. I read every line slowly, like it might say something different if I gave it enough attention. Month to month after the first year, 60 days notice. No clause about needing space. No clause about disappearing to your ex-girlfriend's house to think. By late afternoon, he still hadn't come home. No update, no timeline. Just silence that felt deliberate instead of accidental. I went to the gym, more out of habit than motivation. Halfway through a set, my phone buzzed. His name. "Can you not be weird about this? I'm already stressed." That was it. Not "how are you holding up?" Not "thanks for understanding." Just annoyance that I existed loudly in his peripheral vision. I replied, "I'm not being weird. You asked for space." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, "This is why I needed space." I laughed out loud at that. A couple people glanced over. I didn't care. It wasn't funny in a light way. It was funny because it was so predictable. When I got home, the apartment felt different. Less like a place someone would return to, and more like a storage unit full of shared habits. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How every piece of furniture was something he'd picked. How my things had been slowly pushed into corners and drawers over time. Around 9 that night, curiosity crept back in. Against my better judgment, I checked his location again. Still at Maya's. And then, like a punchline delivered too late, he texted, "I might stay another night. I'm not ready to talk yet." No question mark. No acknowledgement that this was also my life he'd put on pause. I sat down on the couch and imagined him there. Imagined him explaining to Maya how confused he was. Imagined her nodding along, offering understanding, maybe comfort. All while I was expected to wait quietly, grateful for updates like a well-trained inconvenience. Something hardened in my chest. He asked for space. He didn't ask me to stand still. That night, I made a decision. Not out of anger, out of clarity. If he was going to figure out whether he wanted a life without me, I was going to help him experience exactly what that felt like. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was anxious, but because my brain wouldn't shut off. Once a thought breaks through denial, it doesn't politely wait its turn. By morning, I wasn't angry. I was methodical. I took inventory, not of his things, of mine, what I paid for, what was in my name, internet, utilities, the couch, the TV, the bed frame he loved but never chipped in for. Funny how I'd never kept score before. Funny how clear everything becomes when someone leaves you behind without actually breaking up. Around 10, he texted again, "How are you holding up?" It almost felt insulting, like he was checking on a pet he'd left with extra food. "I'm fine," I replied. That seemed to irritate him. "You don't sound fine." I didn't respond. I was already on the phone with the leasing office, asking very neutral questions. Hypothetical ones. They were polite, efficient, no judgment, just facts. After that, I made another call, then another. By early afternoon, he finally called me. His voice was softer now, careful. "Hey, I think we should talk later tonight." I asked where he was. There was a pause. "Still at Maya's." "Of course." "I just need to say a few things," he added. "I don't like how cold you're being." Cold. That word again. Funny how calm always feels like cruelty to someone who expects chaos. "I'm giving you what you asked for," I said. "Space." He exhaled sharply. "You're doing this on purpose." "Yes," I said. "I am." He went quiet, then defensive. "You're acting like I cheated." "I'm acting like you left," I replied. Another pause. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow, on his schedule, like everything else." After the call ended, I stood in the middle of the apartment and looked around. For the first time, I didn't see memories. I saw logistics. He wanted space to think. I decided I wasn't going to be here waiting when he came back with an answer I already knew. That afternoon, I confirmed an appointment for the locks. The next morning, I didn't feel dramatic about it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled, like a decision had already been made, somewhere deeper than emotion, and I was just catching up to it. I spent the rest of the day moving through the apartment differently, noticing how much of myself I'd minimized to keep things smooth, how often I'd mistaken peacekeeping for peace. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was spiraling, but because my mind was unusually quiet and alert at the same time. Once denial lifts, clarity doesn't whisper. It lays things out plainly and waits for you to act. By morning, I was ready. The locksmith arrived at 9:12 a.m. sharp. Middle-aged, polite. He didn't ask questions, just nodded as I explained what I needed. I stood off to the side while he worked, listening to the click of metal and the scrape of tools that sounded louder than they should have. With every turn of the screwdriver, something in my chest loosened. Not relief, resolution. By 9:47 it was done. New locks, new keys, a clean line drawn where a blur used to be. I didn't rush after that. I made coffee. I boxed his things carefully, not aggressively, not carelessly. Clothes folded, shoes paired, toiletries sealed. I lined everything up neatly by the door, like he was checking out of a hotel he'd already emotionally left. Around noon, my phone rang. His name. I let it ring. Then a text. "I'm on my way over. We need to talk face to face." Need is a strong word, especially coming from someone who vanished without discussion. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then replied with one sentence. "I gave you space. I'm still doing that." 10 minutes later, another text came through. Longer, sharper. "You don't get to shut me out." This is my home too. You're being petty and dramatic. Petty, dramatic. The usual vocabulary when he wasn't in control. At 12:38, there was a knock at the door. Firm, confident, like the door would obey him. I didn't move. Another knock, louder. Then his voice through the door, muffled but familiar. Open it. This isn't funny. I stayed where I was, sitting on the couch, hands steady, heart calm in a way that surprised me. He tried the handle once, twice. Silence. Then disbelief. Did you change the locks? I finally stood and walked toward the door, stopping just short of opening it. Yes, I said through the wood. You asked for space. His tone shifted immediately, sharp with anger. Are you serious right now? I went to think, not to move out. You left, I said, and you stayed gone. This is insane, he snapped. Open the door so we can talk like adults. I leaned my forehead lightly against the door. There's nothing left to talk about. And for the first time since he walked out with that overnight bag, I meant it completely. He didn't leave right away. I could hear him breathing on the other side, then pacing. The tap of his heel against the hallway floor. You're overreacting, he said finally, forcing calm. I didn't answer. That silence thing you do is manipulative. You know that, right? Silence only feels manipulative when someone loses their leverage, I said. You can't just erase me. We've been together 3 years. I didn't erase you. You walked out. That was temporary, he shot back. Normal couples take space. Normal couples don't take it at their ex-girlfriend's house. That hit a nerve. Nothing happened, he said quickly. Too quickly. God, you're so insecure. This is exactly why I needed time away from you. There it was. The rewrite. The version where his choices were my fault. You really changed the locks, he said, disbelief creeping in. You didn't even ask me. You didn't ask before you left. Silence again, heavier this time. So that's it, he said. You're throwing everything away because I needed space to think. No, I said. I'm ending something that already ended. You just hadn't said it out loud yet. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being done. I heard him scoff. Fine, I'll grab my things later when you calm down. Your things are boxed, I said. I'll coordinate a time. Not today. That broke what composure he had left. You don't get to control this. You're not that important. I didn't raise my voice. I was important enough to keep around while you figured out your options. I'm just not doing that anymore. After that, there was nothing. Just the sound of his footsteps retreating down the hallway. I waited until I heard the building door close before I finally exhaled. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. The backlash didn't take long. By that evening, my phone started lighting up with unknown numbers. I ignored them at first. Then came the texts from people I hadn't spoken to in months. What's going on with you and him? He says you locked him out. That's messed up. I didn't respond. I already knew the version of the story being told, the one where he was taking healthy space, and I suddenly lost my mind. Around 8, he emailed me. Not a text, an email. Long, structured. Written like it was meant for an audience that didn't exist yet. He said he felt emotionally unsafe. He said I ambushed him. He said changing the locks was borderline abusive behavior. I read it once, then again more slowly. What stood out wasn't the accusations. It was what he never addressed. Not once did he explain why space to think meant staying at his ex-girlfriend's house. Not once did he acknowledge how that choice might feel to me. At the end, he wrote that he'd come by the next day to get his things and expected me to be civil. I replied with 2 sentences. Your things are packed. I'll leave them with the building manager. Please don't come by unannounced again. His response was immediate. Unbelievable. You've really changed. I stared at that line longer than I should have. He was right, just not in the way he meant. I had changed. I stopped explaining myself to someone who had already decided I was the villain. I stopped trying to prove I was reasonable, while swallowing behavior I'd never tolerate from anyone else. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No checking my phone, no rehearsing conversations, no wondering where he was or who he was with. Just quiet and the certainty that even if everyone believed his version of events, I could live with mine. He'd already left. I just made it official. 2 days later, I got a message from Maya. Yes, that Maya. Seeing her name on my screen made everything feel uncomfortably concrete. We'd never spoken directly before. She was always just this abstract figure he insisted was harmless. Her message started carefully. She said things got misunderstood. She said he was just there to talk. Nothing happened. She added that I didn't have to go nuclear. Go nuclear. like enforcing a boundary was somehow more extreme than inserting herself into someone else's relationship under the cover of thinking. I didn't respond right away. I put my phone down and went for a walk. The air felt heavy, like it might rain, but hadn't decided yet. When I got back, there was another message. She said he was pretty upset, that maybe I should hear him out. I laughed out loud in my empty living room. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Then I sent one sentence. He asked for space. I respected that. There was no response after that. Later that night, I noticed he'd removed me from his social media bios. 3 years together wiped clean in under 48 hours. The photos were still up, though, carefully curated. Nothing messy. Nothing that suggested overlap or uncertainty. It struck me how important appearances were to him, how this was less about losing me and more about losing control of the narrative. The next morning, the building manager texted to confirm he'd picked up his boxes. No issues, no scene. I pictured him loading them into his car. I wondered if he expected me to be there, to look sad, to give him one last chance to explain. I wasn't. That afternoon, I turned the spare room into an office, changed the layout, opened the windows, let the apartment feel like mine again. For the first time since he left to think, I wasn't wondering what he'd decided. About a week later, after the dust had mostly settled, I ran into him by accident. I was leaving a corner store with a bag of groceries when I heard my name. I turned, and there he was on the sidewalk, like he'd rehearsed the moment. Hair done, expression set somewhere between confidence and accusation. He looked me over and said I looked fine, like it was a test. I said thanks. He folded his arms, clearly waiting for something. An apology, discomfort, regret. He said he'd heard I was telling people he cheated. I told him I hadn't told anyone anything. He scoffed and said everyone knew he just needed space and that I didn't have to humiliate him. I almost corrected him, almost explained. Then I stopped. You went to your ex-girlfriend's house to think, I said. People can draw their own conclusions. His jaw tightened. He said nothing happened. Then you should be able to live with how it looks. That landed harder than I expected. For a second, the composure cracked. He said I could have waited, that we could have talked. I shook my head. You already left. I just didn't pretend you were still here. He stared at me for a long moment, then said the line that told me everything. I didn't think you'd actually do it. I nodded. I know. There was nothing else to say. I walked past him, groceries in hand, heart steady. He didn't follow, didn't call my name. For the first time, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one walking away. It's been a few weeks now, long enough for things to stop feeling raw and start feeling clear. I've replayed that moment, him standing there with the overnight bag saying he needed space, more times than I want to admit. Not because I regret what I did, but because I finally understand it. When he said he needed space, he wasn't asking for time alone. He was asking for permission. Permission to step outside the relationship without consequences. Permission to keep me on standby while he figured out his options somewhere that felt familiar and flattering. For a long time, I probably would have given it to him. That's the hardest part to swallow. Changing the locks wasn't about punishing him. It wasn't revenge. It was the first boundary I ever enforced without apologizing for it. The first time I chose certainty over waiting and self-respect over reassurance. Some people told me I was harsh, that relationships are messy, that I should have heard him out. But he already told me everything I needed to know when he chose his ex-girlfriend's house as his thinking space, when he expected me to sit quietly, anxious and grateful, while he decided whether I was still worth coming back to. When he came back to talk, there really was nothing left to say. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally cared enough about myself to stop negotiating my place in someone else's life. He asked for space. I gave him all of it. And in that space, I realized I'm not someone you leave on pause while you figure out what you want. I'm either chosen or I'm gone. This time, I chose to be gone.